We are discussing the trial of George Zimmerman, and we want to hear from you on Facebook and Twitter. Join the conversation at #OurTakeAriseTV, and remember to leave your comments on our Facebook page, Our Take on Arise TV. Tell us what you think of the case. And of course, Our Take has continuing coverage of the killing of Trayvon Martin, the trial of George Zimmerman. And as week 2 of the testimony gets underway today, there's one witness in particular who had everyone's attention last week. And joining guest host Kelly Smith-Beaty and me is Rutgers Assistant Professor Brittney Cooper, Assistant Professor of Women's Studies and Africana Studies at Rutgers University. She wrote a piece for Salon called Dark-Skinned and Plus-Sized, the Real Rachel Jeantel Story. Painting Rachel Jeantel as combative is a classic way to discredit the validity of Black women's traumas. Thank you so much, Brittney, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Also with us is Edward Wycoff-Williams, contributing editor for the Washington Post online magazine, The Root. Williams has interviewed Trayvon's father and the family's lawyer and written extensively about the case. You're back, Edward. Thank you again.
A pleasure to be with you.
Truly appreciate it. Brittney, I have to start with you.
Sure.
Your piece, if there was a bullseye that had a target on it, you hit it right dead in the center.
Thank you.
Tell me, what made you feel like you had to put this to paper and tell this story?
Actually, you know, a friend called me and said, "Are you watching the trial?" And part of it was that I didn't want to watch this trial because I knew it would be very traumatic, that these things are painful. So I watched, she said, "They're picking on this Black girl. You got to watch it." So I tuned in. I watched the video of her first day of testimony. Then I tuned into the second day, and I was infuriated at the condescension, at the combativeness from the attorneys.
From Don West.
Absolutely. And the fact that that was floating to the background for people, and that her defensiveness, which was understandable given his combativeness, was sort of coming to the fore. And I wanted to get a sense of what people were embarrassed about. But as soon as I saw her, I moved through the world as a dark-skinned, plus-size woman when the Weight watching is not going well. And then immediately I said, oh, this is about all of our issues around body size, around fat hating, around sort of colorism issues, and around who we can trust to hold our stories and advocate for justice for us when so much is at stake. And those things became very apparent to me on multiple levels when I tuned in. You
know, Edward, we saw online how Twitter and Facebook and a number of different social media places went all abuzz, really ripping Rachel apart. And what I found kind of shocking and embarrassing is how so much of it seemed to come from the African-American community.
Yes. I think David Love did a piece that hit on some of the themes that Brittney did. He did it for Ebony Magazine, and he talked about how we as African Americans often try to make white people more comfortable. And so a part of that is wanting to put our best face forward. And Rachel Jeantel, with her dark-skinnedness and her inarticulate English, isn't the best of quote-unquote us. And I think he talked about this with respect to sort of the bourgeoisie Black society, right? And I think we're comfortable when our representatives are Barack and Michelle, yes, or people like us who are all educated. And that fits a narrative that white people can accept, or through our eyes, white people can accept. Because let's be very clear that there are loads of inarticulate white people in America. There are loads of hugely uneducated white people in America, and ignorant white people in America. But yet we have this burden of Blackness, which is to be perfected in a way that they don't have to be, right? And so I think that that's a part of what was playing out with her. And I think it's a part of what was playing out in the social media, because people felt that she was embarrassing us, and by proxy, therefore, embarrassing Trayvon. A lot of people, because we've heard about this quote-unquote girlfriend for so long, whether or not she was or was not his actual girlfriend really doesn't matter. I think we wanted her to be pretty in a way that was acceptable to white people, articulate in a way that could tell his story best. And what she came with was truth and realness in a way that would make anyone uncomfortable, really, because the whole point of this trial is to get at a truth that makes Americans in general uncomfortable, right? And I think that that's a part of what that's the dynamic and the paradigm that we're struggling against that Brittney so brilliantly articulated.
And I think the other thing, Brittney, that you bring out is the fact that, let's be realistic, this is also someone who speaks multiple languages.
Absolutely.
She speaks Spanish, she speaks
Haitian Creole,
Haitian Creole and English. And even though there are some that might consider her functionally illiterate because she did not write the letter herself to her mother, this is still someone who, albeit might be uneducated, does not mean that she is unintelligent.
Right.
And it seemed like what you were also saying in that article was, don't judge a book by its cover.
Absolutely. Well, partly I'm saying, so a few things. One is, there's this wonderful quotation from Martin Luther King when he was doing all of the marches, and an older woman had marched in the Montgomery bus boycott, and she was tired, and he said, "Mother, can we get you a ride?" And she said, "I ain't no ways tired." And he said, you know, the ungrammatical profundity of her statement really buoyed him, right, and showed him the power of this movement. And I think that is what she represents for us, that movements and justice don't have anything to do with folks' command of English grammar. What we have is a dead young man here who lost his life for senseless reasons. And she was there to testify about his life and about what he was doing. And all of those things float to the background because we're so focused on the external, the presentation of it. And to me, one of the things that I really wanted to bring out in the piece was that this was in some ways the very logic that got Trayvon killed. The inability to understand how he was moving through the world. So his outward presentation, a hoodie, automatically meant he was a threat. So a hoodie makes Skittles and iced tea become lethal weapons, apparently, right? And apparently dark skin and plus-sized
it's unpalatable.
Absolutely makes you an untrustworthy witness. And so so in some ways, if folks can believe Rachel Jeantel, then they can believe Trayvon Martin. And if they can't believe her, then they won't believe him. And that is why the stakes are so incredibly high.
I think the other thing, among many things that stood out, was also the disconnect that the defense attorney, Don West, had in just simply understanding and being able to effectively communicate with Rachel, and to the same extent, Rachel with Don, I thought just played out on so many different levels, right? I mean, that just spoke volumes about our own relationship.
Yeah, I was livid. In part because I don't actually buy that they didn't understand her.
That's right. Yeah,
well,
that's what I was going to say. I mean, when you look at what I think he played his role effectively. And if you're on the prosecution side, then you should be pissed off by the time you know, his examination is over. He did what he was set out to do, which is to discredit her. And I think that he did it brilliantly in that it's not that he didn't understand. I think he recognized that most of Middle America wouldn't understand.
Yes.
And so if I can exacerbate that and bring that to light, then I can, you know, render her guilty, and through her, you know, they're all the same. They all run around like this little pack of wolves, and I think he did that
And I think that that's what's so deeply problematic, is that he completely understood and understands. All these people are from the South, one, and so the vernacular isn't that different. And one of the points that I made, I was on NPR talking about this very subject, and I made the point that I, yes, have gone to Yale, gone to law school, gone to Oxford, but I'm still a boy from Newark who understands how black people talk who aren't necessarily as educated as I am. And so Rachel Jeantel made just as much sense to me as all of my cousins, all of my sister, my brother, and my grandparents. And so I think that there's something deeply problematic about not forcing Americans to be multi-contextual, moving from one context to another, in the same way that she could, moving from Spanish to Haitian Creole to English. And so it's sort of almost, it's a slight in such a weird way, because her brain is far more adept at understanding the nuances of language than his is. This is a man who only speaks English. And so this idea that somehow, because she's using a vernacular that's different, means that it's incorrect is deeply flawed, one. And two, goes to the heart of everything that Brittney wrote about in terms of understanding what it means to be a black boy moving through the streets and just wanting to be left alone because all you did was go get Skittles and you're on the phone to a girlfriend and you just want to get home and look at basketball.
But it was a mistake that cost him his life. And
exactly.
And as Brittney put it in your article, I would argue that despite all of the accolades and all of the credentials that Edward Wycoff-Williams just mentioned, essentially what you were writing is what anyone else would see is simply a black man who was a threat. Well, listen, thank you both for being here. Please come back. Brittney Cooper wrote an amazing piece from Salon, and you're going to come back. I'm just admitting it.
Definitely.
Sure.
Just putting it down out there right now. And Edward Wycoff-Williams, thank you so
pleasure.
much for your continuing analysis as we cover this case. And you are watching Our Take.